So, I've been trying to tune my own piano for a couple of weeks now, and one thing that has always bothered me is tuning the unisons. Mainly, how good are the unisons supposed to be, and how do I know when my unisons are good enough? Using Audacity and a script I wrote in Python, using a package called PyAudacity, I'm able to measure how good my unisons are by visualizing the audio of the unison and extracting partials. I started here with this note, which is A3. That's A right below middle C. I chose this note because although it didn't sound perfect, it did sound pretty good and is a good representation of how most of the unisons on my piano were sounding. You can see here in the audio that there is a beat shown by the rise in volume, and extracting out the partials makes it much more clear. So by highlighting this note and then running my Python script here, just type in the note that I want to, the note I'm examining, the number of partials I'm extracting, and it's basically just a macro that runs a few commands to extract the partials of the note using the high and low pass filters. This shows the first 5 partials in order: the fundamental, the octave and a fifth, another octave, and a major third. The beats become much more clear in the higher partials, and we can listen to what those sound like, especially in the second partial. This is an octave up. This would be octave and fifth. Also, take a look at the volume indicator up here to look at the change in volume. Yeah, and that gives you an idea what those sound like. And now knowing what those sound like, we can listen for the beats when trying to tune the unison again. So my strategy was to isolate each of the strings. Here's the left and middle string, and I isolated it and tuned it till I could get it to sound like this, which is totally pure. I did that again with the right string. You can see it took me a few attempts. One interesting thing to note here on the right string is this phenomenon I've just been referring to, like shelving, where it's not really a beat, but it also doesn't decrease in volume in a linear fashion. It's non-linear. This is just in the fundamental frequency, and I probably could retune this out of it, but it would sacrifice the tuning of these other high partials, which here you can see on the octave, the second partial, it's very pure. This is something that will become much more prominent in the bass, having unequal partials like this. And when you put it all together, it ended up sounding like this. You can see in its tail here, it is sort of beating, but really to me, it just sounds like it's ringing out really nicely. Examining the partials, you can see a few beats here in the second partial. I'll play that. Maybe like one beat every 2 seconds. Although you might say these aren't perfect, let's just see what an actual perfect partial will sound like. And thankfully, I have a Yamaha Clavinova Digital Piano I compared it to. I just recorded this on the line out. This is the sampled Yamaha CFX, like their concert grand piano, and this is what their A3 sounds like. And you can see here, there is a little bit of beating in like the tail of the note. So we know, there's always a sort of a limit to perfection, I guess. And this is a perfect example. They also have this upright piano sound, which to me sounds quite a bit more pure. Quite a bit more pure than the grand piano sounds. Looking at the partials does confirm that, and it does make me wonder if maybe the upright sound is a modeled piano, but I'm not sure about that. And also on the topic of getting perfect unisons, one interesting test I did was I just muted 2 strings of A4. So this is one string. It should sound perfect, like a perfect unison. And you can see, especially in the second partial here, there's a clear beat, even though this is just one string. So this just shows that it's always going to be a compromise when tuning unisons. Now, using this, I decided to try and tune a note in the upper register because I find that really difficult currently. I chose F6. Here's what it was sounding like before. You can hear it was beating really fast. And this note is really high, so the partials don't really show up too well. But it is a little bit more clear when you just look at the first partial, which is the fundamental. You can see some beating in the second partial. So like last time, I just went one string at a time. Here was the right string, what that sounded like. You can sort of see a painful journey I went through trying to get this totally correct over many attempts. So I ended up settling on this for the root string. Just a little bit of shelving, one beat in the fundamental. Fortunately, the left string was actually sounding really good. Putting that all back together ended up sounding like this, which to me sounds amazing. If every note sounds like that in the upper register, that's really good. Even though you can see a little bit of beating, can see a beat right there. But, let's compare that to the perfect example, which is the Yamaha Clavinova. And you can also see they have that beat present. And especially on the upright piano sound, where there's a pretty clear beat present as well. And these are the digital pianos. So this is what perfection looks like. Probably the most interesting area to tune is in the bass, which I decided to go with C2, which is like the second lowest note with 2 strings on my piano. And because this note's so low, I extracted out to the 9th partial, which in this example is the D. And this is what it sounded like before. I was actually really happy with how this note sounded. There's beating in the partials, which you can hear, and you can see here as well. But the second, third, and fourth partials are more or less totally pure in this tuning. One interesting thing to note here is the peaks in volume of the partials, especially here in the bass. You can see that the fourth partial is the loudest, closely followed by the fifth, and then by the third, which is sort of interesting to note. And although I like how this tuning sounds, the fifth partial, which is a E in this case, and the 9th partial, which is a D, they're very prominent sounding. I find them really easy to hear in the bass notes. I'll play what those sound like. This is the fifth partial in E. And then here is the 9th partial. Here, beating, very slow beating. I'll play the original again so you can listen for those. To me, those notes just really stick out in the bass on my piano. I decided to try and tune the beats out of the fifth partial. I ended up having some trouble, but I was able to get a very pure sounding sixth partial. This is my second tuning. And I'll play how this sounds. You can see already there's beating in the second, third, fourth, and a little bit in the fifth, but then the sixth is almost totally pure. The shelving in the seventh, which technically isn't a note. But now you can see there's going to be a lot of beating in the 9th partial. That's very clear here. So even though I got the 5th partial, which is the second loudest partial, to be almost perfectly pure, the 6th partial to be basically perfectly pure, that put the 9th partial and the lower partials way out of tune. And I don't mind how these lower partials sound. You definitely can hear the beating when you play the note again. You can hear the beating of these lower partials pretty clearly, but then the 9th partial really sticks out. Here's what that 9th partial sounds like. And here's the original again. So to me personally, I prefer the first tuning where the ninth partial has very slow beating, basically, which is interesting that these will be pure and this will be almost pure, and then these middle partials will become very impure. So it's sort of like if you want to have the outside partials pure or you want the inside partials pure, is sort of the trade-off that you get. And personally, I prefer having the outside partials be pure. And of course, comparing it to the Clavinova grand piano CFX sound, you can already see here that this is on a grand piano with much larger strings, so the inharmonicity is going to be a bit different. But they prioritize having basically a perfectly pure ninth partial and really pure lower partials, but having a quite pronounced beat in the second partial, and that's what this sounds like. And that does sound really good, but this is just impossible to get on my piano. And comparing it to the upright digital piano sound, where they take a similar approach to my first tuning, which is they go for pure first partial, second partial, ninth partial. They go for the outside partials with impure inside partials. But yeah, you really can hear the beating, but the outside partials sound really nice. Basically exactly how I did the first tuning on my piano. So that's what I wanted to share. I found this exercise to be really helpful in tuning the Unisons on my own piano. It's just really nice to have a definitive answer that Unisons are good or bad. This isn't a replacement to using your ear. It's pretty inconvenient to record and tune and record and tune. It does make it really helpful just to know what to listen to, especially listening to like, what does this partial sound like? And they go playing the note on your piano and listening for that. This was really helpful, especially in the upper register, where I was just totally lost before, and I was able to get like, this is as good as I was able to get upper register. Sounds really good. Yeah, so thanks for watching. Hope you found this interesting.